Hello, Austin, Texas. My name is Adam Sparks, and I am with AISD for All. We exist to promote social justice and equity in Austin, Texas public schools. Today, I'm excited to have Trinidad San Miguel with me, a 44-year education veteran, to talk about the work that he does in school districts across Texas, helping schools improve their outcomes for students. Trini, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Looking forward to this.
So you have worked in education for 44 years now. Let's just start with, how has education changed in that time?
Tremendously. I started teaching back in 1977. What we see today as far as an accountability system, uh, one didn't exist back then. It was just what the district expected, the individual community of that school. There were no standardized tests like we have now with STAR, and of course, all those previous tests that have existed since the early 80s, 1980s, when we had the first one. I remember, the school going down basically, because I think at that time it was the 10th graders that were tested, or it might have been 11th. It kept changing, but that's one definitely a good example about what has changed. That there was, especially 1977, nothing that shut down the whole school for testing. I think they took a standardized test. It might have been the ITBS, but no serious accountability system. As far as professional development, I remember, the only time I ever got professional development was there at the very beginning. And it was mainly motivational. There was some speaker coming in that first day. We needed to report back. Everybody said either it was at the gym that could hold that many of us, or in the cafeteria, and for a couple of hours, and then we were sent to our rooms to start preparing for the first day of school. Now these days, teachers go through a lot of professional development even before the first day of school. Um, when became a certified teacher and principal, there was no exam. Now, a prospective candidate has to take all these tests, whether they want to teach in primary grades, the middle grades, middle school, or middle school and high school. It was just, uh, if your university, and there were no alternative certification programs that I can remember back in 77, it was your university that told TEA, this individual's ready to go into the classroom. No mentoring. The good thing, you see, I was lucky in that I had Miss Hazel Dewey was the other Spanish teacher, veteran teacher, and she took me under her wing, and it's probably the only reason why I survived, because just like all first year teachers, it's not the best. But she took me under her wing, helped me out, and I'm grateful that I had somebody like that at the beginning.
So part of your work for at least the last decade of your career is taking schools that have done poorly or they failed on standardized testing and getting them to improve their results. So let's talk about a failing school. What does a failing school look like, and what are the identifiers? If you just had to describe a failing school, what would that generally look like?
You know, and you are correct, and especially now that we've gone into the A through F grading system, um, what the public needs to realize is it's because of what it could be because of one thing that got them that F. It's not. I've gone into a lot of these schools that have, and we've had different terms throughout the last 10, 12 years that I've been doing this, from academically unacceptable, to does not meet standards, to what we have now, A through F. And I have always found all these schools had a lot of good things going on, but it was the STAR test, or it was the TOS test, or it was the TABS test that caused them to be identified as low performing. Lots of good things going on. It could have been that everything was great, but maybe at a high school, it could have been the algebra test that got them that, that low rating. So it's not, I've always felt that it's not a fair uh, picture of what the school, because you go in there, you just like every school, the majority are excellent students. You got that 5% that always creates problems or anything, and but it is not a true depiction of what's going on even in these schools.
So, as far as one of your tasks is to go in there and then improve the educational results on these tests. Um, so, let's talk about the results then. Are all schools capable of improving their scores?
Absolutely, all of them are. Um, and I want to make clear that the way it's being done now is a different way. Where, like I mentioned to you, that I've done only one effective schools framework visit to one school, a charter school here in Austin, and it has no impact as far as the accountability rating that they will get, or it can't be moved up. So I want to talk about, since you're thinking more about the other role that I had up to this year, the professional service providers. Yes, what we took a look at, I mean, and it's a deep data dig. Talk about social justice. We looked at every type of student, and if you look at the NETA report, if they meet the minimum size requirement, like for Hispanic, white, African American, in the bilingual program, special ed program, uh, there's like maybe 15, 16 cells where all the student data is dumped into. And, like, for example, if I can explain, if I'm a Hispanic student, and say I was in the bilingual program, but I was also being served by special ed and I was economically disadvantaged. If I don't pass, my school gets hit 4 times, because when they look at the Hispanic and I didn't pass, I would count against them. Being on free and reduced lunch, economic disadvantage, I didn't pass. So even on that cell, they get hit. So it was about doing a real deep data dig. Who are the students that are not passing? And how many times are they counting? Not that we were going to play a game that these are the only students we need to focus on, but to really get a clear picture about what's going on. So to start with the big, that those areas, but then to start making connections that this kid is is really hurting you 3 or 4 times, and then beginning to making sure teachers were aware of it. That's the one key thing that I always help or talk to schools about is they don't need to know the accountability system like the back of their hand, just the basics. What does it involve? So that way they know when they're thinking about Trini, okay, now I know why I need to really work with him and keep up with him, because he's not performing well. But how far away is he from passing? Because I could just be one more correct answer and I would have passed it. So again, just being that close to passing, it's a failure. And now they're talking, well, in the last couple of years, and this is where when I go in and work with schools, we talk about progress, student progress. So it's about, can we help Trini or any student that did not pass at least improve one whole year, because TA can figure it out based on the next grade and what that score is, because then I would be counted as a passer, even though I could have failed. Because maybe, say in third grade, maybe I made a 20 on it. But then the next year, I take it, and the consecutive year, say in English or math, and again, I failed it, but I made a 50. Well, that 30% right there is worth one year. So I will be counted as a passer. So that's what we had to look at, is to, we could not just simply look at numbers and percentages anymore. We got to look at each student and where are they and how close are they, even though they've been failing and the history shows, they have never passed star. Get them at least. It's a important. The kid is going to feel good for once. I passed star. And that begins to make the kid believe in himself. I can do it. I can do it. I didn't pass third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, but now when I'm in sixth grade, I did it. So it's really looking at data, deep dives, and really looking at the student. No, don't just stop at numbers and percentages. It's about looking at the student.
So right now you're with the Effective Schools Framework, which is part of TEA, a five-step process to help schools improve. Let's just go through those quickly. I think they're all very interesting, and the order of operations is important too. It starts with strong school leadership and planning. Let's talk about the role that school leadership has, and how can you reform a school when you're taking that same leadership? You know, if you have the same people in charge, how do you get them to help move a school because they were part of the problem and then making them part of that solution? How does that work?
And Adam, I can talk to both sides of that because I have worked where the principal, the year they got the low rating or the F, were kept there. But I've also gone into schools where they removed that principal and brought either from the outside, most of them got an inside principal, meaning inside the same district, and had a good track record of doing well. And some of those principals love that kind of challenge, coming into a school where things can only improve, and they were able to do it. And so here, get like those that are there, you're right. You have to work with it. You almost have to build their self-confidence too, because they took a beating. The public knows you were the principal there when this happened. So it's about working with them. And I never go in, Adam, telling them this is what you need to do. We look at the data, we start talking, and it's not just with the principal, like we mentioned earlier, that district coordinator for school improvement, the leadership team, and then we start discussing about solutions. Because me coming in, and especially when the plans have to be written there at the beginning of the school year, I haven't been in their classrooms. So I depend heavily on what they have experienced, what they're thinking, but we work on getting to the root cause. And they know what the root cause is of this. And so it's going in with a plan about getting them involved. And of course, in many cases, well, I shouldn't say just me because it's everybody, the principal and that district coordinator. We had to build a sense of urgency because some of them didn't think, all right, so we're low performing. What are they going to do? Shut us down? Well, you have to let them know, yes, after 5 consecutive years, yes, TEA will shut you down, and everybody's gone. There's no guarantee you're going to have a job and things like that. But the ones that come in, and guess what? I love working with principals that don't have that many years of experience because I find them more willing to listen and really follow the process about brainstorming and really talking about root causes. While sometimes a more veteran principal wants to rush through the process. Well, I know what it is. I know what, well, we have to slow down, slow down. We really need to make the right decisions here at the beginning of the school year because once we finish that plan, we are going to execute. We're going to monitor it also. And if we find things aren't working, then we need to bring back that team and take a look at the data. Look, it's not happening. What is it? Are we trying to move? Are we making decisions too early, or do we need to let it ride a little bit more? And they're the only ones that can answer that question. Like, well, hey, last year at this point, we are, years ahead of where we were. So, somebody might want to overreact. No, this plan's not working. Oh, no, it is. I can already tell the difference, how my other colleagues are talking about it, how our students are behaving, how our parents are talking about the school. I can see the change. So it's a group effort. It's not one person. It takes everybody at that, the whole community, even the parents play an important role.
The second of the principles is effective, well-supported teachers. Now, we've talked to some teachers and former teachers who've worked in Title I schools, and they talk about how Title I teachers have to wear multiple hats and that they may not have as many student support specialists for their needs, the needs of their students. Um, and how, because of that, it's hard to retain experienced teachers at Title I schools. Now, one of the things that the framework says is the district provides incentives for the strongest teachers to work in the lowest performing schools. Let's talk about the role of money, of funding to turn a school around. Because if a school gets to this not acceptable level, I assume that money comes with that. How many of the problems in underperforming schools can be solved with an influx of resources for supporting the staff at that school?
Yeah. And I don't want to say just throwing money at the problem. It's got to be intentional. What position do you really need? Do you need a reading specialist? Because that's what the problem is. It may not be because of low performance in reading. It may be in math or science. But when the digging deeper reveals it's their reading proficiency. They can, yeah, I can read this sentence, but they don't comprehend what the sentence. So it's about really identifying the key people that are needed. And in most cases, Adam, what they have identified it's either math or both. Or when you get to the secondary, it's more about instructional coaches. These are master teachers that can go into any classroom. I mean, they can be in an algebra class. The next period, they go help a teacher in the geometry. It's about being intentional about who you're going to bring in with that extra money, and can they really work with the staff and improve, because everybody can improve. And we, even like with those coaches and those interventionists, we find out what do you need in order to do your job even better, because you were identified, you're great, but remember now you're working with other adults and it's a different ball game. So yeah, it's money can't solve some of the issues. And here again, I've worked in some schools that, well, there was no money, but in most cases, they were able to give them some extra staff, and the main people that they identified would be those specialists, those coaches that could work with teachers. Some cases, the district even threw an extra assistant principal, especially when you get to the secondary level, the middle school and high school. Sometimes they'll do that. And, while some of the other schools in the district might complain, why are they getting all this? Well, you remember, they're here, but as soon as we get them up to where everybody is, and we see that we can take that, additional, but if we don't do it automatically just because of 1 year that they got off the list, we need to follow that. Can we sustain it, build that capacity that it can be maintained? And what usually happens, and it's really an interesting story, because either those specialists, those coaches, or those principals get so good at their work that they're hired out of from some of those districts, because they know, hey, he just turned around, or she did this great job with the English department at this school. And you're right, going back to it's almost like they get uh, that reputation. They can really work with others, and they can make improve student performance on STAR. And not only on STAR, you see it every day in the classroom, because that's one of the things that I do with the team is we go into the classrooms. Of course, there at the beginning, we focus in on where the the content areas are tested, like the English, the math, the science, the history classes. But once we get rolling on that, then we've been known to go pop in a band class, in an art class, because they can help out definitely, because through their own courses, they have the kids' attention. They can be teaching math. Think about that band director, that choir director, teaching about time, and hey, look, here's the 4 4, that means there are 4 1s in there, and all this. They can help you, or they can simply, okay, your exit ticket for today is write, and there's a writing test. Guess what? There's a writing test. And so they can certainly play a critical role in, even though they're not a star tested content area, but they can help the other areas. Yeah. So it's really interesting what happens in some cases. I worked in one district where she was moved, got that school in 1 year off that list. We could tell they're on their way. They promoted the assistant principal, and guess what? Another school had gone to low performing, and so they sent her, and she says, "I love this work." She was so excited about it. I want to go do it. I want to go to another challenging school. Isn't that great when you see the educators? They want to tackle those schools. I love my profession. I love my colleagues.
Thinking about the Austin School District, um, what is one concrete change or action that you think AISD or any school district can do to increase equitable outcomes for all students across the district?
Mhm. And when I saw that question, a lot of things ran through my mind, but I think the one thing that, and I've experienced it because not that in the area where I live, because it's not anywhere close to a low performance school, but when I talk to people that I meet, when I go out to a restaurant and their kids are on the east side. Now, I'm not saying that all the schools in the east side are low performing. They mentioned something that like, well, I wish we had a magnet program so at our school. So that's where I think, and it's not coming. I mean, I agree, because sometimes when those magnet programs have a lot of criteria about who gets into those programs. But in listening to them, and I truly believe on this, any kid can make it if they have the support. It may take a little bit extra that this teacher's going to have to pay closer attention, that when they're doing their independent work or they're doing group work or whatever, that teacher needs to get close to those students that maybe normally would not be in a magnet program in a high accelerating classes, but they can do it. And I wish that that would be something that we would find what we see on the west side, we find it on the east side, those rigorous courses being offered to all.
And part of our mission with the ISD for All is to work to elect equity-minded trustees to the ISD school board. What's one thing that you hope that any trustee who was to be elected would know and understand about education and AISD?
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking they would probably run for school board because they had a very good experience when they went through school. Just like I had a great one, and I went into education and loved it. As I mentioned to you, it may be 44 years, but it just seems like yesterday I got started. I mean, that's how much fun you can. The one thing as school board members that they should remember, and especially in a big district like Austin ISD, they need to be before they make their how they're going to vote on something. Yes, remember they are elected by districts or areas here in Austin, that they need to think about. Let me run it. I may be representing an area in West Austin, but let me put myself in the shoes of somebody that lives in East Austin. If my decision, do you think, may have a negative impact on the East Side? That's what they need to do. Not, and I know they're elected and they're trying to keep their, because they want to run again and get elected. But you sometimes you have to make those tough decisions that, wait a minute, yes, it is good for my area, but guess what? It would have a negative impact on other areas of Austin ISD. To keep an open mind, look at it through the perspective of what's good for all students, just like you said, all for Austin ISD or Austin ISD for all.
Well, Trini, thank you very much for your many, many years of service and for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it.
If you want to see more videos like this, please like our page on Facebook, AISD for All, or go to AISDforall.org. Thank you very much for joining us.